Hello everyone, my name is Lowko and welcome to some more StarCraft 2 Legacy of the Void. Now in this video I want to be giving you a tutorial on how to be scouting in the Zerg vs Protoss matchup. I'm gonna try and go over some basics as well as some more like strategic aspects of the scouting when you are playing with the Zerg race. Now today I got a Zerg vs Protoss for you that I played a couple of days ago myself, and I think it at the very least sums up pretty nicely how scouting generally speaking works in the matchup, because I know there's a lot of people asking, in particular for Zerg vs Protoss, what build order they should be going for, and in a lot of scenarios, you can't really like narrow it down to one specific build order and one build that you can go ahead and execute in all the bases, or like in all the games, just because it really depends on what the Protoss is doing. In the Zerg vs Terran matchups, there's some, blind timings that you can go ahead and, sort of make units at. In Zerg vs Protoss, it's a lot trickier because they've got a lot more options, right? It's not like they're going either Marine Marauder or they're focusing on like, siege tanks, for example. Zerg vs Protoss, they have about, I don't know, like 20 different all-ins off of 2 bases. You're sort of having to, scout those out all individually. Now, the way I like to look at it is that you have sort of like a full list of all of the build orders that Protoss can go for and all of the strategies that Protoss can go for, and you sort of like eliminate ones at any given timing. So let's say right now I'm still assuming my opponent could potentially be going for a 1 base all-in, for example, a 4-gate off of 1 base, really aggressive, arguably speaking the most aggressive build Protoss can go for, and I can eliminate that as soon as I see the natural, right? So long story short, there's a couple of great ways you can go ahead and scout. First and foremost, we got Overlords. Secondly, we got Zerglings. And third, we got general map vision in watchtowers and whatnot. Now, the very first thing, I'm going to pause the game real quick here. The very first thing to note here is going to be the Overlord placement. Now, Overlord is crucial. Like, Overlord placement is crucial because it's giving me a lot of information. And if you're not very experienced with Zerg, I can just sort of hint at what can be coming right now. But as a general point of view, Protoss is really gas heavy. Now, let's say my opponent is going for some really quick early gases. I can eliminate the fact that my opponent is going to go for a gateway all-in almost every time because they simply aren't getting as many minerals. Now, in this particular case, however, we're seeing that my opponent isn't taking the second gas just yet. And while it wouldn't be like unheard of right now for my opponent to still be taking it at this point in the game, I am making a mental note of it, and I'm going to be positioning my Overlord close to where I can scout that gas, because at this very point in time, he still hasn't taken it. And for your interest, usually Protosses take that natural relatively early on, and then they transition towards that second gas. I don't know the specific timing on it, but I'm keeping tabs on how much gas he has. Now, whenever you see the amount of gas that a Protoss is taking, that is a huge indicator of what build they're going for. And right now, I know that it's not going to be taken anytime soon. So, whenever you're in this situation, right, you're assuming that your opponent is going to have 2 gases. However, the very first thing we noted is that he doesn't have that second gas gadget taken right from the get-go. And from here on out, I am starting to think about the different builds that he can go for. Now, the next thing I need to go ahead and scout is, once again, like I said, it could be like a 4-gate off of 1 base. I need to figure out whether or not he made an expansion. Now, on this particular map, I can do so with my second Overlord, and I'm actually going to be rerouting this guy very shortly just to sort of figure out what is going on. But I'm already seeing additional gateways being added on. I see 2 more at this time. Once again, if he would have taken an extra gas in the main base and he would have been on 2 bases, or on 2 gas in that situation, I wouldn't really have been very suspicious at all. But in this particular case, I'm scouting that he still is only on 1 gas, and I'm scouting that he did go for a natural. So at this point, my thought process is as follows, okay? And when I'm playing this game, obviously, I'm still making workers, and I'm still, like, macroing up. But already at this time, you can see I'm starting to queue up the spine crawlers. And my thought process is as follows right now. My opponent decided to skip out the early gases. Does he must be getting extra minerals? Does he can't really be teching up? Those are 2 main points, right? He can't really be getting a starport very easily because he won't really be able to afford any kind of like oracle play. He might be able to squeeze that 1 Phoenix, but that's what's that gonna do, right? So he's definitely gonna go for something mineral heavy, and in pretty much all early game situations, that is gonna be a bunch of gateways, and more often than not, that's gonna be 4. So all I need to do right now is just make sure that I defend against that little bit. Now, obviously, in some cases, right, you will, or in most cases, really, you will notice that your opponent is going to be taking this extra gas. You will notice that your opponent is going to be taking the gas in the natural, at which point you're going to have to respond differently. If they're going to be teching up, I would highly recommend you get the Spore Crawlers at the 4-minute mark in every single base, just because that's sort of like defense against all kinds of aggression. So in that particular case, like, let's say my opponent would have been taking the gases, and I would have also seen the gas right here in the natural, I would be taking the Spore Crawler in this base at 4 minutes, in this base at 4 minutes, at this base in 4 minutes. However, in this case, we're seeing that, you know, lack of, like, gas that he has, so I don't need to worry about it, right? Like, I could be going for the Blind Spores right now, but knowing what we now know, right, he's only on 1 gas geyser here in total, I really don't need to worry about very much, because I know he simply can't afford really early DT play, and he really can't afford any kind of really early Oracle play. So you basically have to be a little bit smart about how you approach your builds. Now, in this case, I gotta make sure that I don't over-defend either. The problem with Zerg, obviously, is that you always need to make a decision whether or not you want to be making units, or whether or not you want to be making workers, right? So in this particular case, I am making a couple of units just to make sure that I can deal with the potential aggression that my opponent can throw at me. We scouted a bunch of gateways. I'm assuming that he is indeed going to be doing a little bit of damage, and I'm scouting about with the Zerglings just to figure out if he made any kind of pylons. Now, we did find 1 pylon, so I know he's going to try something cheeky. Yeah, I believe there's another... yeah, there's another pylon over here that he's gonna try and do some damage with. And this, like, at this point in the game, I'm still blindly making units, right? Even though I haven't really scouted very much of an army, I know very well that this is coming just by checking out the gas timings and just by checking out the amount of units, or the amount of minerals he's been gathering, right? So I'm still scouting about here, not seeing the 3rd gas taken either, still having full vision of all of his gas, and I am just making non-stop army here, because I know as long as I manage to hold on here, I'm gonna be in a great spot. And indeed, my opponent does decide to walk a bunch of Zealots into my 3rd base. I think I'll lose a Zergling or 2 here. Technically speaking, not the greatest of greatest micro, but I can go ahead and counterattack at this point in time. Now, counterattacking in general from Protoss is scary. And notice, by the way, right when this attack fails, my opponent immediately takes all the gases, right? Right as the attack doesn't really do very much, he's immediately going to be taking all the gases because he knows he's going to be behind as far as technology goes, right? We got more supply than him. We're even in the amount of workers. Actually, he's slightly ahead in the amount of workers. I'm going to start drawing up shortly. But I am definitely ahead as far as tech possibilities go. So finally, at the 5-minute mark, we do see that robotics facility going down. I'm still scouting about, not going hardcore into the offensive, just because I really do need to find out whether or not there's any more hidden pylons. And indeed, we do find another group of zealots just sort of standing about. So I'm moving out with a bunch of my army here, trying to micro backwards a bunch of these weakened roaches. We'll take out the zealots that we've got. But while I'm going on the offensive here, and I do want to point this out really clearly as well, while we are going on the offensive here, I know that there's only a small chance that I will actually be able to win the game here, right? Just from straight up experience, I suppose, I know very well that there's still a lot of situations where a bunch of sentries, for example, because he's got the 4 gases, or like a immortal with a couple of zealots and a photon overcharge, will be able to take out a much bigger army. So because I know that I'm going to be in a, you know, not guaranteed advantage here, because I scouted that initially and because I scouted the pylons as well, I'm going to go ahead and drone up instead. Now, this is the point where you can go ahead and actually also make the decision of the build order that you want to be going for as Zerg. So in my particular case, the one build that I really enjoy doing is a +1 missile, +1 armor, roach speed timing attack, which is probably the most basic Zerg timing in the world. But it does mean that I need to drone up first and foremost until I have 3 bases fully saturated before I start making any more army. So at this point, while I am attacking, I am still scouting here. I am having a look at what my opponent is doing, and while I'm attacking, I am droning up like crazy. Trying to force a photon overcharge here. Obviously, if I can finish off the game, I will go ahead and do so. Trying to force the photon overcharge here. He's actually going to double photon overcharge almost immediately. That's fine for me. I can use this time to morph in some Ravages or whatever I want. But at this point, I start the transition. So, most important scouting that you can go ahead and go for as Zerg is the Overlords on the gas geysers. Knowing exactly what your opponent is getting as far as the gas count goes, is extremely important, right? So let's say, for example, right, just to give you a couple of numbers, because I know some of you will really like that. Normally, you will see your opponent going for at least 2 gases right as early as they possibly can after getting the Nexus in the natural in the main base. So they try and take the 2nd gas as soon as they possibly can. Now, at that point, there are a couple of variations. So if you want to be going for a 2-base all-in with Protoss, and you're gonna be focusing on a gateway-heavy army, for example, like 3 Immortals with a bunch of Adepts, 2 gas is really the only thing that Protoss needs. They only need 2 gases in order to successfully pull off that push. However, that also immediately does mean that if I see my opponent going for 4 gases, right? Let's say I see him go for 4 gas early on into the game. Right when he gets the natural out, he takes a double gas right there. I know very well that he's not going for the Immortal Adept all-in, right? And that's a very subtle thing to recognize here. If you see that that is the case, you can drone up much greedier as Zerg, right? Because you know very well that he's not going to be having that, you know, that build order or like that build out. Because he simply is going to get way too much gas income if he's going to have 4 gases off of 2 bases to afford like a 7-gate Immortal all in, right? And while they technically could go for aggression with like a bunch of extra sentries, it's just not very common. So, what I'm trying to say here, right? Is look at the Protoss amount of gas that they have. Look at the amount that they've got going on here. And keep on guessing the build that they're going for. Now, initially, that's going to be really difficult. Initially, that's not something you can quite easily do. But there is a lot of practice that comes into that just makes things way easier. So even right now as well, right? So as far as the other bits of scouting goes, always have Zerglings running around the map whenever you have spare time. Whenever you can, run some links across the map to find hidden pylons. Particularly if your opponent seems to be the guy that does that. In this case, he's been hiding pylons left and right, so I've been doing that. Keep your Overlords and Overseers at proper locations. Scout about with changelings whenever you can. Have a look at like the different kinds of exits that they can take from their bases. So on most maps, that's only really one passageway. On this particular one, they have like a little bit of vision over here as well. And pretty much all the time, there is no excuse to not have the watchtowers. Make sure you have the watchtowers taken because it's only a 25 mineral investment. Either way though, at this point I've been transitioning towards that +1/+1 timing. As you may have noticed, I've got a lot of saturation here. I've got all the gases taken just in case I'm getting up a Spire here. And very shortly I believe I will be going for the 4th base. Or actually I got the 4th base going up over here as well. But this is where the +1/+1 timing attack starts taking shape. And notice the supply counts. That is just because we've been, you know, able to take that early game advantage by just simply scouting what my opponent was doing, recognizing that he wasn't really teching up whatsoever, delaying the amount of workers that we're making, and then transitioning into a really powerful timing. Now, I still have to be a little bit careful. He does have a bunch of Immortals in there. We're gonna be dancing back and forth here, but very shortly, I will be able to just simply walk over the amount of units that my opponent has. And it's not for the lack of macro on my opponent's end. It's just that he decided to put all of his eggs in one basket early on into the game and go from there. So, scouting, very important. Don't just blindly go for a build order. Use a build order that you're finding online, maybe as like a guideline. I made a lot of videos about build orders in all matchups. Use them as a guideline, but always make sure you are scouting what your opponent is doing, because Zerg is really the one race that needs to be playing like responsively. You can't just go ahead, right, and just blindly do the build order and then complain when your opponent is going for a push that you weren't anticipating, right? Like, let's say I would have been droning up and playing my blind build. My opponent would have just simply caught me off guard with that 4-gate. All of a sudden, like 8 Zealots would walk into my 3rd base, and I would have had absolutely no clue what's going on. But the gas geysers, once again, are a huge tell. The lack of this guy early on is a huge tell of what the build order is that your opponent is going to be going for. So I hope you guys enjoyed watching this video. Let me know if you would like to hear more like heavy strategy type talks in the comment section down below the like button. And other than that, I want to thank you all for watching. Have an amazing day. Do not forget to smile, alright? And I will see you in the next video.